Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the Venus Retrograde, which begins on the 5th of October and runs through to the 15th of November. And I'll be outlining some of the key themes that the Venus Retrograde highlights to us and giving a basic overview of what it can all potentially mean. Before I do that though, I just want to clarify that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It merely gives us insights into what's unfolding around us. It gives us a context to what kind of lessons are there for us to learn and what's kind of influencing the collective at this time. But at the end of the day, we're each responsible for how our own lives unfold, and it's up to each and every one of us to connect with the astrology and use it in a way that empowers ourselves but not at the expense of others. The key part to even connect with the astrology in a healthy way is that we need to be grounded and connected to the earth and her natural rhythms. Otherwise it can be very difficult to actually handle the energies because we don't have that grounding point to how our bodies and minds deal with the energy. Now, Venus retrograde. Venus is one of the rarer retrogrades, whereas most of the planets retrograde either once a year or in Mercury's case up to 3 times. Venus only retrogrades once every 18 months, and she's unusual in that she returns to the same point in the sky for each retrograde once every 8 years. So what we'll be experiencing during this retrograde may well have a strong reflection on what we experienced 8 years ago, last time Venus went retrograde through Scorpio and Libra. So if we bear that context in mind and think back to this time 8 years ago and see what was going on then, we may get some clues to what kind of issues will come to the surface for us to deal with. Now, Venus is all about values and relationships. She's the natural ruler of Taurus. It deals with the values and the instinctual sides of Venus, and Libra, which deals with the more is relationships, but also societal values and the kind of conditioning we get through that. Just the more social consciousness as opposed to personal. And Venus retrograde highlights any imbalances in these two areas. So more often than not, we swing more towards the Libran side of Venus because we're heavily conditioned by societal expectations or how we're expected to behave, that we override the more instinctive side of Venus, which is ruled by Taurus, and we end up losing touch with our own personal value systems and understanding what our own personal value is. So when Venus is direct, she's generally associated with things like love, peace, ability to perceive beauty, and cultivating harmony and diplomacy. When she's retrograde, however, whatever areas that we've been trying to suppress or avoid dealing with in areas like relationships or our values come up to be reviewed. So if in our relationships things aren't balanced, or either the person that we're with doesn't recognise our innate value, or the relationship is all one person giving, the other person taking, rather than it being a healthy balance between both giving and receiving, then Venus retrograde really highlights this to us and pushes us to have that need to resolve it, to address it head on. So in some respects, Venus retrograde can feel more like Mars in that it's more direct, it's assertive, and whatever issues have gone unchallenged so far in relationships where the scales aren't balanced equally in a relationship, this is a time where you may feel that drive to address it and challenge the imbalances in a relationship to try and get it back on an even keel. But it's also a time where certain relationships may have to end for whatever reason, or the form that relationship is taken may need to come to an end because it no longer serves us, or it no longer honours who we are, or doesn't allow us to embrace the sides of ourselves that are emerging as we're growing. So any relationship which holds us back or stops us from further becoming more a great embodiment of who we're becoming is likely to come up for review at this time. But the most important relationship that we have is the one that we have with ourselves, because if the relationship we have with ourselves is dysfunctional, if we constantly judging ourselves, criticising ourselves, and believe that we're not worthy of love or we're not worthy of belonging, things like that, these core issues are reflected in our relationships. So if we want our relationships to be healthy, we have to have a healthy relationship with self. Venus, in some sense, is all about that, the connecting and loving of one another, but it has to begin on the inside, because if we're unable to see our own worth, then people will inevitably take advantage of us, because we don't have that clear idea of this is what we're worth and therefore we're prepared to accept this, we won't tolerate being treated like that. If we don't deal with this side, then the relationships will inevitably be dysfunctional. And if we want an honest kind of unconditional love from other people, we have to be able to give it to ourselves first. Otherwise, if someone did come along who was radiating unconditional love towards us, we probably wouldn't recognise it because we don't give it to ourselves. So Venus retrograde brings into focus what is old and outdated in our lives in terms of values, our tastes, whatever we like, and it's also highlighting the relationships that either need to be transformed or they need to be let go of altogether. And this is particularly a strong emphasis with Venus in Scorpio, which is from the 5th until the 31st of October. So most of the retrograde is going to be in Scorpio, with the midpoint of it being on the 26th, when the seed of new beginnings takes place. So initially Venus is in her evening star form, but she'll go in front of the sun and become invisible. So this is her symbolic dive into the underworld, where we meet the more primal side of our nature. We meet the parts of ourselves that get buried or suppressed for whatever reason, because we're conditioned to suppress it or judge it as being unworthy. So it's taking that dive into the underworld of our own psyches and learning to love those parts of ourselves that have been rejected or ignored, because it's only if we achieve a greater degree of holistic health within ourselves that the health of our relationships overall can improve, and we can truly start to challenge the nature of them. So because this is about delving into that shadow side of ourselves, a key piece of advice that's often given during a Venus retrograde is don't start any new relationship with other people, because who we are or how we're expressing ourselves during the retrograde may be very different to when we come out the other side. So in the same way that with a Mercury retrograde you don't want to sign any contracts unless you absolutely have to, because the terms may change. Same with Venus in relationships. If we start a new relationship now, we may be seeing things through a different lens perception to normal, and maybe operating under a different value system to normal. So things that we may ordinarily avoid, we may suddenly be attracted to or seduced by. So especially when Venus is moving into the morning star phase and the seed has been sown at that conjunction, it's very important that we don't get sidetracked into new relationships as a distraction from ourselves. We need to go through the entire 40-day process of exploring the deeper levels of the self, exploring the more visceral values, if you like, or the more innate or instinctual side of our nature, and learn to bring it into balance with the more social side, so that a more holistic sense of self emerges and we have a greater degree of love for oneself. In the same way it's not a good idea to start a new relationship, it's also, with Venus being about our values, a piece of advice often shared is avoid any impulse purchase at this time. Don't suddenly go on some spending spree, because what you may feel attracted towards during the retrograde, when we come out the other side of it, you may think, what the hell were we thinking, or what was going through our heads when we bought that? Because Venus deals with our value system and what we deem valuable and what isn't, and what we therefore seek to purchase with money, etc. So this is a key time to try and spend time in solitude, or spend time in personal devotion, get grounded and observe what issues are coming up. Look at the relationships we're in, because we've got this, with it being in Scorpio to begin with, and Libra from the 31st of October through to the 15th of November, relationships are front and centre here. With Scorpio, it's re-evaluating our relationships and seeing, are they authentic, or do they allow us to be our real selves, or are we constantly having to hide or reject parts of ourselves in order to please the other person, or in order to keep the relationship going, in which case the relationship isn't really founded on love, because for a relationship to be founded on love, both people need to have the freedom to be who they are unconditionally and have unconditional love and support from the other person. So if we're not getting that in our relationships, if a person's only loving us if we're behaving a certain way, and that way is causing us to have to bury or suppress parts of ourselves, then the retrograde may bring up these issues, and either the other person learns to accept these sides of ourselves and learns to love us unconditionally, or the relationship either has to be transformed in terms of the way we relate to one another, or it's let go of because it's not a relationship that fosters our growth. It doesn't nurture the person we're becoming, and therefore to hold on to it would become toxic to our system, because it creates a holding pattern that stops us from moving forward. And that's pretty much the antithesis of Scorpio. Scorpio is about breaking those patterns, breaking those emotional attachments, those mental obsessions and instinctual behaviours. It's learning to face these, accept them, and through the power of love transform them so they're no longer hijacking or sabotaging our efforts in life. It adds more power, we empower ourselves, and we're better able to love people unconditionally. But as I said, we have to do the work on the inside first and face our own shadow, face the parts of ourselves that have been rejected over the years because we've been trying to put on a mask or present ourselves in a way that means that fundamental parts of ourselves get suppressed and buried. But these areas don't go away, they're still there, and Venus retrograde brings them up. So if we want to achieve more healthy relationships, and if we want to have relationships with people who are right for us or nurture who we're becoming, then we have to be honest with ourselves, deal with the relationship with ourselves first, and then if relationships with other people do not foster or do not nurture us or do not enable us to become or embrace who we're becoming, then it's a relationship that either we have to change the way we relate with the other person, or the relationship has to go altogether because it's not going to help us. So during this retrograde, the more we can be present with ourselves, the more we can face our own core issues and open our hearts up and learn to accept love and give love unconditionally, first to ourselves and then to other people, the fundamental dynamics of relationships can transform, and the relationships can build on a foundation of love rather than conditional acceptance. And if we can also pay close attention to our values and tastes at this time, so we may have lived by a certain set of values for a long time, but some of the values may no longer be relevant to who we are. They may have changed over time, and we have to then let go of the things that we habitually do or to think that we value, and instead allow the new value system to take root. For some of us, it could be that we've been heavily conditioned to adhere to a very materialistic set of values, and we may find that during the retrograde, more spiritual value system is trying to make its way through our consciousness and set new seeds for a new way of relating to things. But again, we have to be present with ourselves to learn to be loving and accepting of ourselves when all these issues are coming up. And if there are imbalances in relationships, they obviously need to be addressed, but the important thing is that when we do address them, it's not done from a place of anger and judgment. We have to first kind of transform that anger, or let go of the anger side of it, so it's just assertiveness, and then state clearly and calmly what our needs are in relationships and what we are prepared to accept in terms of how people treat us, and what we won't accept. And it's through setting these new boundaries and making it clear that what we expect or how we expect to be treated in relationships, and having consequences in place if it's not happening. I'm not saying we'd stop loving the other person, but it's making it clear that we're not there to be taken advantage of. If you love us, then love us. If you don't, then either we transform it so it's just a friendship, or the relationship is let go of because you're not prepared to respect who I'm becoming, as it were. And the more we can learn to have that innate self-worth and that value, the more likely we are to attract more beneficial, harmonious relationships. So it's doing that inner work to transform our relationship with ourselves and transform the core of our being. And where we have issues, where we struggle to receive love, or we struggle to see our own worth, it's ask ourselves, why do we struggle to see our worth? Why do we feel that we're unworthy of certain things? And deal with the core issue there. Learn to love, learn to reframe our relationship, learn to change the relationship we have with ourselves so it's one based on self-love rather than self-judgment, because it's through self-love that we can then radiate love to other people unconditionally. You can't love other people if you don't know how to love yourself, because you wouldn't know what love even means. So this is a time for us to look at our relationship with love. Is it something that we freely give to ourselves and therefore can radiate it to other people? Or do we at some level secretly fear it because it's shining a light on areas that we don't like about ourselves and we struggle to accept? In which case we need to learn to accept these areas, to accept that there are fundamental parts of the overall collective that is ourselves and our soul and our mind and body. And if we can heal these internal relationships, if we can bring body, mind and spirit into harmony and love ourselves unconditionally at all times, no matter whether we've made any mistakes or done something that unfortunately led to something that we didn't mean to happen. It's about loving ourselves enough to, and be humble enough to, if we've wronged a party, be humble and seek forgiveness, or in some cases, if someone else has wronged us and they don't recognise it as them having done that, it's having the courage to forgive the other person, to release any emotional poison from our hearts. But we may need to transform the relationship with the other person, because clearly at some level they don't value us as much as we thought. But at the same time, the more we do this work, we clear a space within our lives for new relationships to come in, because nothing new can take place if we don't jettison the old first. But it's not we don't necessarily do any of the shedding of stuff during the retrograde. It's more, or making any new beginnings during the retrograde. It's more recognising what no longer serves, what no longer belongs in our lives, what values no longer resonate with who we're becoming, and have the courage to let go of them, no matter how much they may have brought comfort in the past. If they don't serve us, what was good for us in the past can become toxic. So just let it go, allow space to form within ourselves, but don't start making any major new beginnings until after the retrograde, because we need to have that devotion to oneself, to thine own self be true. And by healing ourselves through cultivating self-love, self-acceptance and humility to acknowledge where we've been played a part in certain dynamics, and through forgiving ourselves, letting go or cutting ourselves free of those dynamics, we then make space in our lives for new, more fulfilling relationships that honour who we're becoming. And obviously we need to make sure that we're honouring the other person. It should never be one way in a relationship. If someone's loving us unconditionally, we should be doing the same back to them. Otherwise, it's unfair on the person giving the unconditional love, because they're not getting anything back. It's not that they're loving to get something, but a truly healthy relationship requires both parties to be able to love unconditionally and accept each other's shadow side as we're going along. It's through loving acceptance that the shadow can be transformed and truly empowered partnerships can emerge, whether they be romantic, whether it be friendships, whether it be business or anything along these lines. But for them to transform, we have to do this inner work. We have to transform the relationship with ourselves. We have to connect with our own heart chakras and explore the contents of it and let go of the things which hold us back and keep us small, because only by letting go of the old that the new can come in. This is Scorpio in a nutshell. It's the transformation of the old through releasing it and surrendering to a higher power and allowing that wisdom and guidance to show us what needs to be let go of in life, where things need to be transformed, and where things can carry on in our lives but may need to be adjusted slightly so that a greater parity emerges in the relationships. And it's also recognising what new value system is working its way into our consciousness, and making sure that during the retrograde we don't allow anything to undermine the process. We don't allow new relationships to distract us from the process of healing the relationship with ourselves, and we don't allow sudden random impulses to buy goods that we wouldn't normally get to derail the transformation of the value system. It's being present within ourselves and waiting till after the retrograde before we start exploring the seeds of new potentials that were sown during the retrograde, and identify which ones we want to water so that the new self that's being born through the process can be nurtured, and we empower ourselves through a great sense of self-worth and self-love, and making sure that we have an expectation of balance and harmony in relationships. And it's not just through avoiding issues, it's facing them head on and seeking to work through these issues with one another so that the relationship can develop stronger foundations. And if we do this, the relationships develop strong pillars of trust and mutual understanding, mutual love. And with relationships like that, there's so much more we can then achieve. But we have to achieve these basics of honesty, trust, and love and forgiveness in relationships in order for them to transform. If we don't cultivate qualities like these and everything's about manipulating one another, then it's very unhealthy for both parties, and either it's going to cause a significant amount of conflict during the retrograde, or it's one that's highlighted as one we just have to let go of. So I hope that's a useful guide for the Venus retrograde. There's a lot to take on board, and Venus is a very complex goddess in that respect, because of the two areas that she deals with have no common ground between them other than being ruled by Venus. But if we can deal with these two areas, and rather than trying to force things to happen or make things happen, it's remain grounded and to observe what's unfolding, pay close attention to our own internal responses to it, and allow intuition and wisdom to guide us to what's being highlighted to us that we need to either transform or let go of, and where we need to cultivate greater peace and balance in our relationships, so that the relationship is founded on mutual giving and receiving rather than constant giving and taking, where it's manipulating to try and get things or get the relationship to work a certain way. So I hope this useful guide for Venus retrograde. May through the process of that inner work, I hope the Venus retrograde brings you many insights and a much stronger sense of self-worth, and hope it clears the ground or clears way in your life for new, more fulfilling and empowering relationships to take place, or any relationships that can still continue but need transforming. Get the necessary transformation so that both parties are honoured equally, so we achieve that ideal balance between honour oneself and honour one another. So a Venus retrograde bringing you many insights and many blessings. Take care and may you be blessed.